If you want to know why you are tired all the time, why you feel undervalued at work, why people do not take you seriously, why you constantly feel like you are fighting for respect you should already have, I can tell you the answer in one sentence. You talk too much. Not because you are annoying, not because you are unintelligent, but because you are using words to solve a problem that words cannot solve. You think that if you just explain yourself clearly enough, people will respect your decisions. You believe that if you justify your choices thoroughly enough, people will stop questioning you. You hope that if you defend yourself convincingly enough, people will finally see your value. But respect does not work that way. Respect is not convinced through argument. It is not earned through explanation. It is not granted because you made a compelling case. Respect is commanded through the simple act of trusting yourself enough to stop seeking permission from people who have no authority to grant it. And every day you spend explaining yourself is another day you are telling the world that you do not trust your own judgment, which gives everyone else permission to distrust it too. You know what separates people who command respect from those who constantly beg for it? One simple thing. The people who have respect rarely explain themselves. The people who lack respect never stop explaining themselves. Think about the last time you justified a decision to someone who questioned you. Think about how much time you spent trying to make them understand your reasoning. Think about how you felt afterward. Exhausted, right? Frustrated, maybe even a little resentful. And here is the truth that nobody wants to hear. All that explaining did not earn you more respect. It cost you respect. Every single day, capable people destroy their credibility with words. Not because they say something wrong, not because they lack knowledge or skills. They destroy their credibility because they say too much. They explain when they should simply state. They justify when they should simply decide. They defend when they should simply move forward. This happens in every boardroom, every office, every family dinner, every relationship. Right now, someone is losing a negotiation because they are over-explaining their position. Someone is losing authority with their team because they are justifying a decision that needs no justification. Someone is losing respect from their partner because they are defending a choice they have every right to make. The pattern repeats itself millions of times each day. And most people never realize they are doing it. They think they are being thorough, they think they are being considerate, they think they are being clear. But what they are actually doing is broadcasting uncertainty. They are announcing that their decision is up for debate. They are inviting criticism. They are asking for permission from people who have no authority to grant it. Here is what happens in the real world of business and life. When you explain yourself unnecessarily, people hear doubt. When you justify your decisions excessively, people sense weakness. When you defend your choices to everyone who questions them, you teach people that your choices are defensible, meaning they can be attacked, challenged, and overturned. The executives who run Fortune 500 companies do not spend their time explaining themselves to their board. They present their strategy, state their decisions, and move forward. The negotiators who close million-dollar deals do not justify their asking price for 30 minutes. They state the number and wait. The leaders who build loyal teams do not defend every policy change to every employee. They announce the change, explain the implementation, and expect compliance. Notice the difference. These people provide information when needed. They communicate clearly when necessary. But they do not confuse communication with justification. They do not mistake clarity for constant defense. You have been taught wrong your entire life. Your parents told you to explain yourself when you made mistakes. Your teachers demanded justifications for your answers. Your first boss expected you to defend every decision. Society trained you to believe that more words equal more understanding, that longer explanations equal more respect, that constant justification equals good communication. Society lied to you. The truth is this: your time is valuable, your decisions are sound, your choices are yours to make, and you owe nobody an explanation unless they have genuine authority in that area of your life or a legitimate need for information. Not your co-workers, not your distant relatives, not your casual acquaintances, not people on social media, not even some of the people you consider close to you. When you stop explaining yourself, something incredible happens. People stop questioning you. When you stop justifying your decisions, people start trusting your judgment. When you stop defending your choices, people start respecting your authority. This is not about being rude. This is not about refusing to communicate. This is not about becoming cold or dismissive. This is about understanding the fundamental difference between providing necessary information and seeking approval through explanation. Right now, you are reading this because something resonated. Maybe you are tired of feeling like you have to justify everything you do. Maybe you are exhausted from constantly defending your decisions to people who have no stake in the outcome. Maybe you are frustrated because you know you are capable, you know you are smart, you know you make good decisions, but somehow you still feel like you are not getting the respect you deserve. You are not getting that respect because you are giving it away every time you overexplain. You are surrendering your authority every time you justify yourself to someone who has no right to question you. You are diminishing your value every time you spend 20 minutes defending a decision that should have taken 20 seconds to announce. The most successful people in the world understand something that you are about to learn. Respect is not given to those who ask for it through explanation. Respect is commanded by those who trust themselves enough to stop seeking approval. Your career will change when you master this. Your relationships will transform. Your confidence will multiply. Your time will become your own again. Your energy will return. Your stress will decrease. Your results will improve. But first, you need to understand exactly how you got here. You need to see the trap clearly before you can escape it. You need to recognize the patterns that have been holding you back, the beliefs that have been costing you respect, and the habits that have been stealing your power. Because once you see them, once you truly understand what has been happening, you cannot unsee it. And that awareness becomes the foundation for everything that comes next. Let me show you what over-explaining actually looks like. Because most people do not even realize they are doing it. Someone asked you why you chose a particular vendor for a project. A simple answer would be they offered the best combination of price, quality, and delivery time. But instead, you say, well, I looked at 5 different vendors, and initially I was going to go with another company, but then I realized their delivery schedule would not work. And I talked to my colleague who had worked with this vendor before, and even though they are slightly more expensive, I think the quality justifies it. And I really spent a lot of time on this decision. So I hope everyone understands why I made this choice. You just turned a 10-second answer into a 2-minute plea for approval. A friend asks why you cannot attend their party. A simple answer would be, I have another commitment that evening. But instead, you say, I really wish I could come, and I feel terrible about this, but I have this thing I committed to months ago, and I tried to see if I could reschedule it, but I cannot. And I was really looking forward to your party, and I hope you're not upset with me, and maybe we can get together the following week instead. You just turned a boundary into a negotiation. Your boss questions a decision you made. A simple answer would be, I evaluated the options and chose the one that best met our objectives. But instead, you say, I know this might not have been the perfect choice, and maybe I should have considered other factors, but given the time constraints and the information I had available, this seemed like the best option. Though I understand if you disagree, and I am open to changing course if you think that is better. You just invited your boss to override every decision you make going forward. This is the trap. It does not feel like weakness when you are doing it. It feels like being thorough. It feels like being considerate. It feels like being a team player. It feels like good communication. But what you are actually doing is telegraphing insecurity with every extra sentence. Smart people fall into this trap more often than anyone else. You know why? Because smart people can see multiple angles. They understand complexity. They recognize that most decisions involve trade-offs. They can anticipate objections. So when they make a decision, their brain immediately starts generating all the reasons and considerations that went into that choice. And then they make the critical mistake. They share all of that internal processing with everyone who asks. But here's what you need to understand. Your internal decision-making process is not public property. The fact that you considered 17 different factors before making a choice does not mean you need to explain all 17 factors to everyone who questions you. Your reasoning is yours. When you share all of it, you are not being transparent. You are being weak. This behavior pattern starts early. Think back to your childhood. When you broke a rule or made a mistake, what did your parents say? Explain yourself. When you got a bad grade, what did your teacher demand? Tell me why this happened. When you disagreed with something, what were you told? You better have a good reason. You learned that explanation equals survival. You learned that justification prevents punishment. You learned that if you could talk long enough, make your case thoroughly enough, present enough evidence, you could avoid consequences or change someone's mind. That worked when you were 10 years old and had no power. It does not work now. Then you entered the workplace and the pattern intensified. Your first manager probably asked you to justify every time entry, every expense report, every decision. You had to explain why you needed certain resources. You had to defend your project timelines. You had to rationalize your approach to tasks. You learned that in corporate environments, everything requires documentation, explanation, justification. But here is what nobody told you. There is a massive difference between providing necessary information to stakeholders and defending yourself to anyone who questions you. There is a world of difference between communicating your strategy to your team and justifying your choices to people with no authority over you. Most people never learn to distinguish between these two things, so they carry the justification habit into every interaction. They explain themselves to their peers when they should be collaborating as equals. They justify themselves to their subordinates when they should be leading with clarity. They defend themselves to family members who have no stake in their decisions. The people-pleasing connection makes this worse. If you were raised to believe that keeping everyone happy is your responsibility, you learned to preemptively explain yourself to avoid disappointing others. You developed a habit of justifying your choices before anyone even questions them. You started defending decisions that nobody was attacking. You walk into a room and immediately start explaining why you are 5 minutes late, even though nobody asked. You make a purchase and instantly justify the expense to your partner, even though it was well within your agreed budget. You decline an invitation and launch into a detailed explanation of your schedule, even though a simple no would suffice. This constant explanation creates an exhausting cycle. You explain yourself, which invites more questions. Those questions make you explain more. More explanation makes you seem less certain. Less certainty invites more challenge. More challenge requires more defense, and suddenly you are trapped in an endless loop of justification that drains your energy, wastes your time, and destroys your credibility. The trap is complete when you start to believe that this is what good communication looks like. You start to think that people who communicate briefly are being unclear or rude. You convince yourself that your detailed explanations are a strength, not a weakness. You tell yourself that you are just being thorough, just being considerate, just making sure everyone understands. But deep down, you know the truth. You are not explaining for their benefit. You are explaining for yours. You are seeking approval. You are asking for permission. You are trying to prove that you made the right choice. And that need for validation is exactly what costs you respect. Respect follows a simple formula that most people get backwards. They think respect is something you earn by proving yourself, by demonstrating your reasoning, by showing everyone how much thought you put into your decisions. So they explain, justify, and defend, believing that more evidence equals more respect. The actual formula is the opposite. Respect equals confidence plus results minus explanation. The less you explain, the more confident you appear. The more confident you appear, the more respect you receive. The more respect you receive, the better your results become. It feeds itself. Watch how this plays out in any business meeting. Two managers present their quarterly strategies. The first manager stands up and says, "We are shifting our marketing budget 60% toward online channels, reducing print advertising, and launching 3 new campaigns next month." Then sits down. Total time, 15 seconds. The second manager stands up and says, "I have been thinking a lot about our marketing direction, and after consulting with several people and looking at various reports, I believe we should probably move more toward online, though I understand some people might disagree, and I want to make sure everyone is comfortable with this approach before we commit too heavily. So maybe we start with a 40% shift and see how that goes." Who sounds like a leader? Who sounds like they need permission? The first manager stated a decision, the second manager requested approval. The first manager will get respect and support, the second manager will get questions, challenges, and endless committee meetings. This happens because human psychology operates on simple patterns. When you speak with certainty, people assume you have reasons for that certainty. When you speak with hesitation, people assume you lack reasons. When you make a statement and stop talking, people assume the statement is solid. When you make a statement and keep explaining, people assume the statement needs defending because it is weak. Silence is the most powerful tool in communication, and almost nobody uses it correctly. After you make a statement, your instinct is to fill the silence. You want to elaborate. You want to provide context. You want to make sure they understand. So you keep talking. But what actually happens in that silence, the other person processes what you said, they consider it, they either accept it or prepare a response, and during that process, they are treating your statement as valid, as worthy of consideration. The moment you break that silence with more explanation, you change the dynamic. Now you are not someone who made a statement. You are someone who is defending a position. Now they are not considering your statement. They are looking for weaknesses in your defense. Trial attorneys understand this perfectly. When a lawyer asks a witness a question and gets a good answer, the worst thing that witness can do is keep talking. Every additional word after a sufficient answer gives the opposing attorney ammunition. Every extra sentence is an opportunity to create doubt. Your daily life is full of these moments. Someone questions your decision, you give an answer, then you feel uncomfortable with the silence, so you add more information. Then you notice they still look skeptical, so you add even more. And with each addition, you lose ground. The psychology of perceived authority works like this. Authorities state, they do not justify. Doctors tell you the diagnosis and treatment. They do not spend 30 minutes explaining why they ruled out 17 other conditions unless you specifically ask. Judges announce verdicts. They do not poll the courtroom to make sure everyone agrees with their reasoning. Military commanders issue orders. They do not hold focus groups to ensure everyone feels comfortable with the strategy. Now, you might be thinking, but I am not a doctor or a judge or a military commander. I cannot just make declarations and expect people to follow. And that thinking is exactly what keeps you from developing authority in your own life. You do not need a title to have authority. You need conviction. You need to trust your own judgment enough to stand behind it without constant reinforcement. You need to believe that your decisions are sound, which means you will not crumble the moment someone questions them. Here is what listeners hear when you over-explain. I am not sure this is right, so let me give you all my reasoning so you can tell me if you agree. Here is what they hear when you state and stop. This is the decision. It is made. We are moving forward. Same information, completely different message. The instant credibility of decisive statements is remarkable. When someone speaks with finality, we automatically assign them higher status. We assume they have information we do not have. We assume they have authority we do not possess. We assume they have thought it through more carefully than we have. None of that might be true, but the way they communicate creates that assumption. And in professional settings, in relationships, in negotiations, perception shapes reality. If people perceive you as an authority, you become one. If people perceive you as uncertain, you become that instead. Think about the leaders you most respect. Do they constantly explain themselves? Do they justify every decision to everyone who questions it? Do they defend their choices endlessly? No. They state their position, provide necessary information, and move forward. When challenged, they might clarify, but they do not crumble. They do not backtrack. They do not launch into lengthy justifications. That is not because they are always right. Leaders make mistakes just like everyone else. But they understand that leadership requires conviction, and conviction cannot coexist with constant explanation. The moment you start defending yourself to everyone, you stop leading. The same principle applies even if you never manage anyone. Your personal life requires leadership too. Leading yourself, leading your relationships, leading your career trajectory. And that leadership dies when you seek approval through explanation. Respect is not requested, it is commanded through the alignment of confident communication and consistent action. When your words are few and your results are many, respect becomes inevitable. When your words are many and your results require constant defense, respect becomes impossible. Remember, let business be an adventure. The success is not guaranteed. The question is not whether you deserve respect. The question is whether you are communicating in a way that allows others to give it to you. Let me show you exactly what this habit costs you, because until you see the real price, you will not change. And the price is far higher than you realize. Start with time. Calculate how many minutes you spend each day explaining yourself unnecessarily. A 5-minute justification here, a 10-minute defense there, a 20-minute explanation to someone who will forget the entire conversation by tomorrow. Add it up over a week, over a month, over a year. If you spend just 15 minutes per day over-explaining yourself, that is 91 hours per year, 91 hours of your life spent seeking approval from people whose opinions change nothing. That is more than 2 full work weeks. You could learn a new skill in that time. You could build a side business. You could deepen your most important relationships. Instead, you are burning those hours trying to convince people who do not need convincing. But time is just the beginning. The energy cost is far more destructive. Every explanation drains you. Every justification taxes your mental resources. Every defense requires you to relive the decision, second, guess yourself, and manage the emotional labor of seeking approval. By the end of a day filled with over-explaining, you are exhausted. And you cannot figure out why, because you did not actually do that much work. The exhaustion comes from constantly being on trial. When you explain yourself excessively, you put yourself in the position of defendant every single day. You are constantly building your case, presenting your evidence, waiting for the verdict. That is not a sustainable way to live. That is not a productive use of your cognitive resources. That is not the life of someone who respects themselves. Now consider your professional reputation. This is where the damage compounds. When you consistently over-explain, Your colleagues start to see you a certain way. They see you as someone who needs validation, someone whose decisions are tentative, someone who can be challenged easily. So they challenge you more, they question you more frequently, they trust your judgment less. This creates a vicious cycle. The less they trust your judgment, the more you feel the need to explain. The more you explain, the less they trust. Soon, you are stuck in a reputation box that is incredibly difficult to escape. You become known as the person who needs to justify everything, which means you become the person whose authority nobody respects. Meanwhile, your colleague who simply states decisions and moves forward gets promoted. Not because their decisions are better than yours, not because they work harder, but because they appear more confident, more decisive, more leadership ready. Perception wins in negotiations. Over-explaining destroys your position before you even begin. When you are negotiating a salary, a contract, a deal, the moment you start justifying your number, you have lost. You are signaling that your number is negotiable, that you are uncertain about your value, that you will accept less if pushed. Professional negotiators know this. They state their terms and shut up. The silence feels uncomfortable, so the other party starts talking. And whoever talks first after the number is stated usually loses ground. But people who over-explain cannot handle that silence. They fill it with justifications, with explanations of how they arrived at the number, with apologies for asking for what they want. Every word after stating your terms weakens your position. Every justification invites a counteroffer. Every explanation suggests flexibility, and you walk away with less than you deserved, wondering why you never get what you ask for. The loss of decision-making authority might be the most insidious cost. When you constantly explain yourself, you train people to believe that your decisions are up for discussion. You teach them that if they question you, you will reconsider. You show them that you do not trust your own judgment. So why should they? This happens with your team if you manage people. It happens with your peers if you work collaboratively. It happens with your family if you lead your household. Slowly, steadily, you lose the authority to make decisions without consensus. Everything becomes a committee decision. Nothing moves forward without approval from everyone. Your ability to act becomes paralyzed by your need to justify. Look at your relationships. How many of them have turned into justification factories? How many people in your life expect a detailed explanation every time you make a choice? How many times do you avoid doing what you want because you dread the explanation you will have to provide? This is not connection. This is control. When someone demands constant explanation, they are not trying to understand you better. They are trying to maintain veto power over your decisions. And when you provide those explanations, you grant them that power. Your boundaries erode one explanation at a time. You say no to something, then spend 30 minutes explaining why. The explanation undermines the boundary. It suggests that your no is conditional, that with the right argument, it could become a yes. So people argue, they push, they negotiate, and your boundary, which should have been firm, becomes a debate over time. You stop setting boundaries altogether because the explanation requirement makes them too exhausting to maintain. You say yes when you mean no. You accept situations you should reject. You tolerate behavior you should shut down, all because you cannot face another round of justification. The compounding effect of all these costs is devastating. Small losses become massive over time. A reputation slightly damaged this year becomes a career ceiling 5 years from now. Authority eroded today becomes complete loss of autonomy tomorrow. Boundaries ignored now become toxic relationships later. Time wasted this month becomes years stolen from your potential. And here's the worst part. You cannot see it happening. The costs accumulate so gradually that you adapt to each small loss. You do not notice that you are making less progress than your peers until they are several levels above you. You do not realize your relationships have become exhausting until you are burnt out. You do not recognize that you have lost yourself until you cannot remember who you were before you needed everyone's approval. This is the true price of overexplaining. Not just the minutes wasted today, but the life unlived because you spent it seeking permission instead of taking action.